Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's get right to it. What's a creepy, unnerving experience that you have lived through? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Pet and house sitting, 2 dogs, 2 cats. These friends of mine lived in the middle of nowhere. It is nighttime, and literally all of them look at the effing corner and look like they're tracking something that is moving. They all get super aggressive, hissing and rage barking. They all stopped at around the same time. I wanted to get in my car and go home. Not okay. Waking up to a strange man standing over me watching me sleep, I froze and stayed still till he left. I thought it was sleep paralysis until I found a box cutter he left on my kitchen table. Turned out to be a maintenance man for my apartment who got fired. Sleep paralysis, multiple times. It started when I lived alone, and I would hallucinate a stranger approaching the door to my apartment and fiddling with the lock until the door opened. Then a shadowy figure would come in and sit on my bed. The sounds and sensations were so vivid, but I could never get a clear visual. It also happened in the hospital, where I imagined a bunch of doctors surrounding me and talking about like I wasn't conscious. And I've seen my partner next to me in bed take on a demonic expression and whisper threatening things to me. Was during World War II archaeological mapping of fighting bunkers and body recovery in the Pacific. We were in one cave that was used as a holdout, mapping the area and documenting for the local government. My flashlight caught all this glinting, shiny stuff in the cave floor, and I was like, oh damn, that's pretty. What's going on here? I walked closer, and in the dark under my flashlight, I realized it was an F-load of human teeth that got blown apart and mashed into the mud of the cave floor. Looked down, and I was standing on more teeth and other parts. It's strange how fast something that looks so pretty can turn sad and creepy. I sat for a sec to look around, and it got a lot worse the more I looked. Plenty more to the story, but that's the general idea. That was a wild project, and the things I saw during that one will stay with me for a long time. It's haunting, but in a sad way, not scary. Just knowing that civilians were in that cave as well when everything blew up with the soldiers that came in and used it as well. The civilians couldn't leave, and the soldiers weren't going to give up alive. Part of the doctrine of this particular fighting force in the Pacific Theater at the time. So many shoes, high heels, picture frames, family heirlooms that folks had taken as they ran for safety. Parts of people were absolutely everywhere in that damn cave. Crazy ass day at work, for sure. The atrocities of war will never end, and they can survive on as a reminder of how bad we can be. I was playing the game Fear in my room at night with the lights out when I turn around and see what looks like the girl from the game standing there watching me play. It turned out to be someone visiting my roommates who, for some reason, let themselves into my room and watched me play for who knows how long before I noticed. I used to work a graveyard shift in retail. Basically, it was a clothing retailer, and when the mall was closed, I would come in and clean the store up, fold the clothes, fasten security tags, etc. I didn't have a car, so my day was me waking up at midnight, walk 2 hours, and get in an hour early to start my shift. Well, the road I took has no gas stations, businesses, or any sort of public place until the halfway point at a park, and I suddenly have the problem of my stomach isn't agreeing with what I ate before I left. So I remember the park has a public restroom. Now, this restroom was basically a basin with a drain for the urinal, a low-pressure sink, and a stall. The public restrooms had no door, was just open going in, and grate making an opening for whatever light coming in, and no lights inside whatsoever. So I use my phone flashlight, go to the stall, lock it, and do my business after turning out the light. A couple of minutes pass of me looking at my phone, and I hear loud, heavy boot steps coming into the bathroom. Now I know people make the joke of, bet you're glad you were on the toilet, haha. No, I learned fear makes your butt clench faster than a cigar cutter. I hold my breath as I hear those boots walk up to the stall and try the door. Thankfully, me locking it showed. I was about to say occupied when this being grunts and growls and starts rattling that door. I stood up, getting my pants up quickly, getting ready for a brawl, and I yell, "I'm armed. If you don't stop, I'll open fire." Now, the scary part was I was bluffing. I had nothing, no knife, no gun, just two fists and a load of adrenaline. The next thing I hear, these footsteps tear out like a bat out of hell. I wait a couple of moments, tighten my belt, and make like a bat myself, my hands up, ready for what there may be. Thankfully, no one was there. I never sprinted so fast to that job, and I never stopped at that park again. On deployment with the Navy, a 19-year-old lookout spotted a dead body in the ocean, so the crew did the decent thing and brought on board, double-bagged it, put it in a freezer, and handed it over to the local authorities at our next port visit. Not to go too far into the gory details, there were enough teeth left to identify it by dental records. Somebody had to clean the wire stretcher that had brought it in, and despite the common acronym for Navy, never again volunteer yourself, I knew another teenager would be assigned that chore unless somebody more mature took it on, so I volunteered. The corpsman provided PPE and iodine, and I gave it a good scrubbing. Sailors, being what they are, two rumors ran around the crew that week. Don't eat the peas, because the body had purportedly been stored next to the frozen peas. It wasn't, according to both the corpsman and the CSs. And there's still skin on that stretcher. This was also untrue. Yet, having been the fool who had volunteered for that work, I got ordered to clean the stretcher a second time. Every crude joke imaginable made the rounds too. What's his name? Bob, etc. Much to the distress of the lookout, who had spotted the body and reported it. Took her aside to say a few kind words to the effect of there's a family that will be able to get closure because of her. She did a good deed. I was having a nightmare about the panda from Kung Fu Panda, and he was making the most inhuman sounds. Sounded something like, "Oh, it was so uncanny." Anyways, I woke up, looked around, and I heard one last "oh" while I was awake. I wasn't inside a second dream either, because I remember processing what happened and leaving to eat breakfast. TL, DR. I still heard my nightmare after waking up. Going down the hill in my car goes from national speed limit to 20 miles per hour, so I slow down way before, pass a car waiting for me since the lane is narrow, and see 4 cars at the bottom of the hill, all in a line barely moving, like it's eerie. They're all next to parked cars, so I have to go slow down to let them pass, but something is off. I go to press my brake, nothing. Press my brake again, nothing. No friction, no nose, no change in the car's movement. Literally stop registering anything, and my body's autopilot takes over. I remember I'm doing 17 miles per hour at this point, so thank God I slowed down. I'm about to crash into the first parked car, but I have to swerve into the opposite pavement and hedge to avoid the car next to it. Car comes to a stop, and for a second, I'm just absolutely clueless what the hell happened. It's like a dream. This is what black ice is. True black ice. Appears from nowhere. Looks like normal road. Wasn't even icy anywhere else, so no warning it would be there. Thankfully, I only got a slight dent where the car was parked in the corner. That eerie feeling is there to warn you things aren't right. If it happens when you're driving, stop and assess the road. It could save your life. Again, nature can be a cruel master, so again, careful on those roads, everyone. When I was 5, I went to the beach with my grandparents. There was a dead orca that had washed up, and a bunch of marine biologists were there trying to figure out why it died, and had dissected it right there on the shore. It had a full quarter of its body removed from head to tail, and I could see all the insides. There was a pool of blood inside it that I could have swam in all the time. The thought that horrified me and gave me PTSD for many years after, it manifested in the strangest way. I couldn't sleep without putting a blanket over my sheets and sleeping on top of that. I'd imagine the sheet as the inside of that whale and plunging myself into that pool of blood. One day I simply got over it, I guess. I'm in a medical program currently. We have cadaver labs. There have been several instances where the company that provides the cadavers didn't warn us about certain bodies having things. The one that I can recall is a guy that donated his eyes for organ donation. They did not sew his eyelid shut. When we opened the bag the first day, it was horrifying. We expected to see eyelids, and instead, they were just bare orbits. Quite the shock. There's an abandoned hospital in my area that is said to be haunted. It was a popular place to go ghost hunting, but the city made it illegal to go there after it was found that it was being used for drug deals, satanic rituals, and rumors of dead homeless people in the hospital basement. Me and a friend would go there anyway, because one of the doors couldn't be locked. The hospital was just shocking. Gang symbols and satanic symbols spray painted on the walls, bloodstains on the wall, a bloody handprint on the wall with the word help written in blood. It was very interesting. The last time me and her went there, 2 armed criminals were attempting to break in through one of the doors with a crowbar. They saw us and asked what we were doing there. We said we were ghost hunting. They said we shouldn't do that because the cops were staking the place out, and then they took off running. We never went back there because we didn't want to risk getting eventually shot. When I was 11, my dad, captain of the local sheriff's department, received a car crash over the radio as we were on the way to school. A sports car had spun out on the ice and became wedged under the trailer of a semi. The man driving the car was decapitated. For a good 9 months at that was the most horrifying thing I had experienced. 9 months later, my dad was called to be the lead investigator of a puppy mill, seeing dogs literally glued to the bars of their cages from feces that they chewed their own feet off, cats that had eaten their own buttholes because the crap was caked on, birds that wouldn't eat anything that didn't have poop on it, the smell of rotting flesh. That was the worst. It's been 24 years and the thought still makes me gag. I was pet sitting at a house in the mountains west of Denver. It was early evening. I was outside throwing the ball for the 2 golden retrievers when out of the blackness came a scream that sounded like a woman. I froze. The dogs immediately started growling and snarling into the darkness that surrounded the house. I heard the scream again, and the 3rd or 4th time I realized that the scream sounded nearly identical every time, which almost made it more terrifying. I rushed the dogs inside and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. I nearly called 911, but the scream was so consistent in pitch and duration that I went to the internet to figure out if it could be an animal. Turns out, the roar of a mountain lion can often sound like a woman is being bludgeoned. This is definitely up there for most frightening experiences in my life. Mother died of cancer in early 2013 while in hospice care. She had passed into a comatose state in the middle of texting one of her friends. We discovered the unsent message on her phone. We never finished the message and thus never sent it either. Fast forward a few weeks past the funeral and into the stages of handling her will and talks with her lawyer. At this time, one of my brothers held onto her phone, will stuff. One day, it received a message from our deceased mother. I don't quite recall the message contents, but we received a few more messages from her over the next almost 2 weeks. I recall them being reminders or something. It was an unnervingly interesting, to say the least. We'd initially set up alert reminders for her to take her pain medication. She was on some 4 milligram opiate pain meds and 800 milligrams of paracetamol as a safety net while at home and conscious, but the reminders were disabled. So we contacted the telecoms provider Mum used and had to explain twice to the poor support person what the issue was. They had to take a few moments to bring their supervisor in on the call because of the strangeness of the call. They looked through her phone history, couldn't find anything regarding any calls or texts from that mobile number. Yet we had the messages which were sent in as evidence. They said it would be looked into, and sure enough, about a week later they called back and said they found the issue. Mum had set up some sort of business reminder clause thing, which was sent in her name to her phone that she managed to uncover and stop. Waking up in the middle of the night and hearing what sounded like a wounded animal wailing inside the house just downstairs, I creeped along the landing and stood there for a bit baffled, and then I realized it was a human, the person making the kind of guttural noise that can only mean absolute grief and horror. After a few moments straining my ears, I then realized it was my mom. My sister's dead, was the immediate thought, and I just stood there frozen, not wanting to go downstairs and find out what had happened. I didn't want to make it real. If I just stayed on that landing in the dark, I could just stay in the reality, where whatever was making my mom sound like an animal hadn't happened yet. But eventually I had to go down. So I did. The wailing was coming from the kitchen, and as I got down to the hallway, I was hit by the cold night air. The front door was wide open, no one there, no car pulled up, the kitchen was dark, but I could tell my mom was in there. I was so confused and scared. As I walked in, I saw a tall figure, definitely not my dad, who was away on a trip at the time, and my mom. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw that she was looking on with a 1,000-yard stare, her face wet. I then recognized the figure as one of our longtime family friends who lived on the other side of town. My confusion deepened. I asked why he was here, with a terse tone that surprised myself, like I was angry he had brought something into our house, something horrible. He then blankly stared and stated that his daughter was dead, my long-term childhood friend. He had received the news just 20 minutes prior that his 22-year-old perfectly healthy daughter had dropped dead in her flat due to unknown reasons. He was home alone at the time, and his first thought was to come to us. In hindsight, it means a lot that he would seek support from us at such a horrific time, but wow, that night will be a core memory for me for all the worst reasons. For a couple of months after that, I would freak out whenever I heard a wailing noise, whether organic or mechanical. It would just immediately take me back to that spot on the landing. That's just terrible. I mean, yeah, there's comfort in having a good neighbor, but just that news is heartbreaking. Sorry for your friends and family. When I was around 9, I used to see shadows that looked like people when I woke up in the night. Most of the time, the shadow looked like a man, and he just stood there looking at me, no movement or anything. Another time, I saw a shadow that looked like my mom sitting on the edge of my bed. I thought it was her, so I just said, "What are you doing?" No reply. These shadows never really did anything, just stayed still. I just went back to sleep and didn't think much of it. For some reason, no idea why I didn't feel scared. I'm looking around my room right now in case something jumps out at me, LMAO. I thought it could be sleep paralysis, but I could move and speak, so it probably wasn't. Maybe schizophrenia? I've never seen them since then, kinda scared they'll come back. Basically, me and 2 of my friends snuck out once and hung out with some friends. Then at 2 a.m., me and my friend argued with our other friend, and as we were heading back home, he said he wanted to beat us up, and he was kind of beefy. Then his light shut off, and we got scared and took another route. We accidentally went the wrong way, and we passed a gas station and my school. We turned back and we noticed a shed that was safe distance from us. Then the shed door swung open, and me and my friend took off and stopped after about 20 seconds to see we weren't being chased. At 5 a.m., we managed to get back home and saw our friend sleeping on the couch, who apologized the next morning.